Lord of the Mysteries audiobook by Kevin 311. Observing each other, Klein sat in the seat belonging to the fool and looked around. This is Miss Magician, our new member. Then he looked at Fours and introduced the rest to her. This is Miss Justice, and that is Mr. Hanged Man. As Fours nodded her head as a form of greeting the members with the corresponding code names, she observed the other members. Miss Justice is blonde and seems very young. She sits with a graceful posture. Mr. Hanged Man has dark blue hair as messy as seaweeds. He doesn't have a very bulky figure. He doesn't like to talk, but when observed by him, it gives me a sense of unease. He must be a leader of some faction. Mr. Sun looks like a teenager. He's very silent and reserved. Other than that, I can't tell anything else. Maybe he's just as weak as me. Mr. World's eyes are very cold and quite gloomy. It's obvious that he isn't someone to be trifled with. As a writer who had written a best-selling novel, she showcased her unique traits. While she looked at the other members, they were also looking at her. Among them, Justice Audrey was the most attentive. From her figure, I can eliminate Miss Zio. Brown hair and slightly curled. Is she Madame Fours? Temporarily, I can't rule out the possibility that Mr. Fool has pulled in someone else. Her pronunciation and the way her mouth moves is the same as her Backland accent. Her aura and emotional colors match as well. It's unlikely that Mr. Fool will specially create a fake image for the members, right? There's no need for him to hide anything. After a few seconds of sizing Fours up, Audrey had nearly superimposed the blurry figure with her impression of Fours. If I can find another trait in other areas, I can almost be certain. She waited with interest to verify her beyonder powers. At the same time, she felt that there was no need to reveal her identity to Fours. It would be better to keep some secrets. Yes. Let's see when she finds out. Audrey withdrew her gaze, producing a faint smile on her face as she quietly watched from the sidelines. At that moment, since there were no new Roselle's diary entries, Klein controlled the world and said, "I want to know about the Devil and Guardian sequences." He was certain that the Sun knew the details of Sequence 6 Devil because he had previously mentioned Devil studies. And in order to not expose the fact that he was investigating a series of murders, he had deliberately added the Sequence 5 Guardian of the God of Combat Pathway, also known as the Giant Pathway. It was the mainstream path for Beyonders in the City of Silver, so it was impossible for the Sun to be unaware of it. As for the corresponding Sequence 9 Warrior, Sequence 8 Pugilist, and Sequence 7 Weapon Master, Klein had long since learned of the details from the Nighthawk's confidential information. As for information regarding Sequence 6 Dawn Paladin, he had just learned of its information from Bishop Otravsky. Therefore, the only thing that he could ask and be willing to pay a price for without wasting money was Sequence 5 Guardian. In addition, he didn't directly ask the Sun, but instead issued this request to everyone, because according to the way things had developed, it was impossible for the world who had just joined the Tarot Club to know that the City of Silver held the Giant Pathway. If it's just the Devil sequence, I know a little about it. Alger, who had some standing in the Church of the Lord of Storms, interjected. Derek Berg glanced at him and without a thought straightened his back and said, "I'm very knowledgeable about these two sequences. The payment I want is information related to the fallen creator. The equivalence of the two pieces of information will be determined by Mr. Fool." Having said that, he realized that he had not received Mr. Fool's agreement as he hurriedly turned his head to Mr. Fool to make the request reverently. "Son, don't blame me. You were the one who made the request." The corners of Klein's mouth twitched slightly as he said with a chuckle, "Sure. Furthermore, when it comes to the understanding of the true creator, none of the ladies and gentlemen present can compare to me," he added boldly in his heart. While they were discussing this matter, the magician Fours was stunned upon hearing the conversation. "The Devil sequence is the Devil Pathway. Which sequence number is it?" What is the Guardian Pathway? Which sequence number is it? I've never heard of it. Fallen Creator. The true Creator. God, they are actually exchanging information regarding the true Creator. That deity is known as the most ancient and powerful existence amongst the deities. What kind of organization did I join? After receiving a positive reply from the fool, the world said without any hesitation, deal. I request a private exchange. I really want to hear it, however. I need to be frugal for the time being. There are still 2 more months until the new year. Endure it, Audrey. Audrey blinked her eyes, reluctantly withdrawing her gaze from the sun. Their sights, vision, and spirituality were then shielded by Klein. The world quickly lowered his head and wrote on a conjured sheet of paper his own understanding of the true Creator, including standard likeness such as the hanged giant and the eye behind the shadow curtains, including the information that members of the Aurora Order believed that this evil god was the original creator of everything. At the end, Klein had included his impression of the evil god through his interaction with the evil god's spawn, the sensation of the deity's aura, and the sensation when listening to the true creator's voice. Fallen, twisted, bloody, crazy, evil. Then, as Mr. Fool, he gave a comment. This piece of information is slightly more valuable than the information regarding the devil and guardian sequences, but the difference isn't that huge. Thank you, Mr. Fool. Derek earnestly received the piece of goatskin and read through it carefully a few times. The thing he was most concerned about was that the true creator was known as the creator of everything. Twisted, fallen, crazy, Derek repeated the words, vaguely able to see the dark tragedy that had engulfed everyone in the City of Silver for more than 2,000 years. Did the Lord not abandon us? It's just that he had gone mad. Derek found himself able to resist using blasphemous thoughts to examine the Lord that created everything, the omnipotent and omniscient God who was worshipped by the City of Silver. It's time for you to answer my question, the world urged in a hoarse voice. Derek restrained his seething and sorrowful thoughts and said after 2 seconds of silence, when different species of creatures consume the devil potion, they will experience different types of mutation. They will have traits that are unique to them. Which kind of devil would you like to know about? There are actually distinctions. Klein was puzzled. He soon realized one thing: there was a blind spot in his thought process. What if the serial killer wasn't a human but an animal? After consuming the corresponding potion, it could transform into a devil animal. Step by step, one sequence at a time, it will turn into a devil. Although the probability of an animal losing control far exceeds that of a human's, it was still not enough to deal with what-ifs. I have to investigate this, but in that case there would be more questions. Where did the devil, mutated from an animal, obtain the potion and Beyonder ingredients? It should be impossible for it to join Beyonder circles. Klein maintained his silence and manipulated the world to say, what I want to know is the common trait of all kinds of devils. Derek recollected and organized his knowledge before saying, the most frightening thing about a devil is that if you can cause lethal damage to it in a very short period of time and take action to put that into practice, then he can sense, notice, and grasp where the danger comes from and who it came from, and then selectively kill or seek revenge on them. And this period of time varies from a few minutes to a day. Different devils have different instincts. This ability is a little scary. However, it's different from a clown's intuition. It doesn't seem like it can be used in combat, but instead, detect the source of the danger ahead of time. It's closer to the whim ability I've read in Xianxia novels in my previous life. I don't know if I can interfere with or even block this intuition in this mysterious space above the gray fog. Would Stuart end up in danger? Klein leaned back into his chair, seemingly uninterested in the subject of the discussion between the sun and the world. Seeing that the world didn't show any signs of surprise, Derek continued, They all possess the ability to gigantify their bodies and thus break free from their bindings, temporarily increasing their strength and speed. Their skin is mutable, equivalent to wearing a layer of hard armor. Their blood and flesh can act as a retardant and reduce damage. They're immune to most toxins and do not fear curses or flames to a certain degree. They have innate flame and corruption-type spells. They're cold-blooded, don't panic, don't feel fear, and have a strong ability when it comes to physical combat. They're also adept at using various items to inflict damage. Their greatest weakness is that they tend to lose control. Even if they don't, they will often display a cold-blooded and cruel madness, being easily controlled by desires such as bloodlust and murderous intent. Really strong, as expected of a Sequence 6 devil. Could it be that among the 22 Beyonder paths below the high sequences, Sequence 6 or Sequence 7 are the thresholds of a qualitative change? In this respect, different sequences differ, thus they have become the dividing lines between ancient and modern mid-sequences. Klein controlled the world and said, "I'm very satisfied with your information." Derek didn't act modestly. He nodded and said, "Guardians seldom suffer damage. Once they enter a defensive state and give up attacking, few can break through their defenses below that of the high sequences. It's the same for numerous types of damage. When they attack, their corresponding defense will decrease significantly, but it will still be stronger than full-body armor. Their Sword of Dawn and their Hurricane of Light, as well as their other Beyonder powers, allow them to deal damage to any type of monsters. They're not confused by illusions. They can help their comrades within a certain range by taking damage and protecting them. Following the descriptions given by Derek, Klein couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Compared to a guardian, a Dawn Paladin's defense is like that of a child versus an adult. A guardian would probably be able to withstand the bullets of a steam rifle. In the wars of this era, they wouldn't die unless they were focused on by large-caliber cannons. This is an ability found in the novel Yang God, where an expert is able to predict danger once they reach a certain stage in their cultivation. 312, a failed disguise. When Derek finished, Klein manipulated the world to nod and say, "More detailed than I thought. Transaction complete." Before the world finished his sentence, Klein had simultaneously removed the barriers insulating Justice, the Hanged Man, and the Magician. After a few seconds of silence, the world looked around and said with a dark smile, "I don't have any more requests for now." Having a rough understanding of the process and its characteristics, Fours was eager to purchase the corresponding Sequence 8 Trickmaster of the Apprentice sequence. She clearly remembered that Mr. Fool had said that the reason she was troubled by the full moon was due to her low natural order of life, and that the pain would decrease with the rise of her sequence. This made Fours eager to obtain the next formula. However, it would expose the Beyonder pathway I'm from. When everyone becomes familiar with each other and knows more about each other, exposure will become less of a serious matter. However, for the next few gatherings, I have to conceal that so that the members of the gathering won't be able to identify the real me. After thinking rather calmly for a moment, For said, "I wish to obtain the formula of apothecary and trickmaster. I will pay in cash." She intentionally added the apothecary formula to her actual request in order to cause the others to have a misinterpretation. If any member of the gathering really had the formula, she would still take it. She could then sell it at a higher price to Viscount Glaint, who'd been longing for this formula for a long time. In any case, she definitely wouldn't suffer a loss because of this and might even make a huge profit. As for money, Fours wasn't short of it for the time being. Not only were the royalties of her best-selling book entering into her account over time, it was accumulating to quite a sizable amount. Furthermore, she also had additional income streams. such as the £650 she had received from Miss Audrey in the Kalangos and Inti's Ambassador Backerland cases. Poor Zio. She spent more than £200 to compensate the families of the two deceased which were involved in the Lanevis case. I wonder if Miss Audrey would pay her when things clear up. The note with Mr. Fool's honorary name on it was found in the bookcase of Viscount Glaint's house. Could it be that one of his ancestors was a member of this gathering? Is this a gathering that has been held regularly for decades, if not centuries? For his thoughts were suddenly a little distracted. Only 2 seats away from her, Justice Audrey was a little stunned when she heard For's request for the apothecary and trickmaster formulas before she accurately grasped For's thoughts. She's For's. The trickmaster is for herself, and the apothecary formula is to be sold to Glaint. She can also do this to complicate the situation and fool the others. Audrey nodded indiscernibly and was more certain of the magician's identity. She's not of a very high sequence. At best 8, most likely 9. Who knows where Mr. Fool pulled her from or if she's from a special place. Her accent has the peculiarities of Backlund, but she's not necessarily in Backlund. The hanged man Alger was also observing the newcomer, making sure that she wasn't a threat to him. The son Derek didn't think too much about it. He was just trying to guess whether Miss Magician belonged to the City of Silver, or if she was from the world where Miss Justice and the others lived. Klein cast a look of pity at Miss Magician, not expecting much from her attempt to conceal her identity. When you meet a telepathist who is very familiar with you, you might not be able to conceal your true thoughts even if you know the other party's ability beforehand and are on guard against it. What's more, you didn't even know anything. The fool, Klein, sighed in his heart for Miss Magician. At the same time, he controlled the world who said hoarsely, "I have the apothecary formula, £230. As for the trickmaster formula, I'll do my best to find it, but I can't guarantee success." There was no contradiction between exchanging the apothecary formula for money and using it to groom a useful helper. They could be run in conjunction, so Klein made the world speak first so as not to be intercepted by the hanged man or the sun. As for the formula for trickmaster, he only had some ideas. From his point of view, the mystical item, Master Key, was most likely related to the corresponding sequence of Trickmaster's corresponding sequence 9, Apprentice. If he were able to divine its origins above the gray fog, he might be able to find some clues. Well, actually the most convenient way is to ask the existence suspected to be Mr. Door who keeps murmuring during a full moon. In addition to asking for help, he probably provides formulas and the acting method, so as to make the target stronger and complete difficult tasks. Unfortunately, before the target is strong, they can't even hear his ravings. They will break down and even be close to losing control. This results in a vicious cycle, Klein lamented. Instead of responding to Mr. World's words, Fors looked around and saw that the hanged man, Justice, and the sun had no intention of opening their mouths. It was obvious that they didn't know the apothecary and trickmaster formulas. "Mr. World, please try your best to find the trickmaster formula as soon as possible." Fors fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "As for the apothecary formula, I plan to buy it now. How should I make the payment?" The other party seemed to be a man from Loan as well, and he's willing to accept gold pounds. But the gold pound has always been more recognized than the other currencies. As she spoke, Fors was also trying to determine the world's background. The world completely didn't mind her sizing him up as he said softly. After finishing his description, Klein displayed the apothecary formula in front of the world and had the fake person hand it to Miss Magician. "Transaction is witnessed by Mr. Fool, so you don't have to worry if it's fake." "I trust Mr. Fool." Fors nodded immediately. She spread open the formula and began memorizing it seriously. At that moment, Audrey, who couldn't bear to see her friend go through such labor, commented, "You can seek Mr. Fool's help during the sacrifice to recall the formula. You don't have to memorize it specially. If you encounter any problems, you can also pray to him by reciting his honorable name, him. Miss Justice is actually using a salutation used to describe deities to address Mr. Fool. Him. Could it be that he is really a he? But why would he be willing to help us in doing such trivial matters? That's not right. As long as the ritualistic magic is done right, the 7 orthodox gods will also often respond to their believers and complete their requests, for said to Justice. Thank you for telling me that. Your name is just like your character. Audrey suddenly felt a little guilty. She suddenly seemed to recall a problem as she hurriedly asked, Miss Magician, do you know of the acting method? Acting method. Fors looked at Justice in a daze. She soon discovered that the other members such as the Sun and the Hanged Man had no additional reaction to the term. Clearly, they knew what it meant. Today's gathering makes me feel like a country bumpkin who has just arrived in Backlund. I've been to so many Beyonder gatherings at the very least, all right. Fors thought half sorrowfully, half joyously. She couldn't help but want to write a novel with this feeling of hers, naming it Miss Wall's Tour of Dreamland. You don't seem to know. Audrey made a definite judgment based on Fors' reaction and her usual performance. She turned around and looked at the person shrouded in gray fog at the end of the long table. Mr. Fool, can I teach the acting method to Miss Magician? If so, what price would she have to pay? Audrey had intended to ask directly if it was like, before trading the information for entries of Roselle's diary. However, she quickly remembered that there was a great overlap between the Beyonder circles of Fors and her own. Therefore, if she did that, she might lose many opportunities of obtaining Roselle's diary. It's not a very important problem since it's just a matter of time before Fors realizes that Mr. Fool wants Roselle's diary, and I would certainly have other Beyonder circles. However, she knows that I have a few pages of Roselle's diary, and if she wants to collect them, she will come to me immediately. However, Mr. Fool has read all of those diary entries. After this gathering, I have to find a chance to tell Fors that all the Roselle diary pages were accidentally lost. Audrey predicted the chain of events and tried her best to convey her concerns to Mr. Fool in body language. What's Miss Justice hinting at? Oh, she knows Fors, but she doesn't want to reveal her identity, which means that she doesn't want the payment I request to cause any trouble in that regard. Klein thoughtfully chuckled. You can make the decision. You can do the explanation since I do not wish to repeat what I've said in the past. This is also a form of respect to the goddess, he added inwardly. Praise Mr. Fool. Audrey's heart leaped in joy. She straightened her back and slightly raised her chin. She tried to look at Fors in a different manner as she said, the acting method is a method to speed up the mastery of potions and minimize the risk of losing control. Do you want to know about it? There's such a method. For real. Mr. Fool is such a lofty figure, so he definitely wouldn't lie about such a small matter. Fors widened her somewhat languid eyes, pursed his lips, and said, yes. As long as one was a Beyonder, there was no way they wouldn't wish to learn of similar methods. Fors suddenly felt thrilled. Audrey thought carefully and said, there are 2 requirements. 1, without the permission of Mr. Fool, you are not to teach the acting method to others. The second is to pay £200. Her original plan was to use Roselle's diary as a benchmark for the price. The number of pages she and the Hanged Man had used to repay the debt had been converted into a corresponding price, but in reality, Roselle's diary was sold cheaply because it couldn't be deciphered, and most of the time, it was impossible to determine which was the real one. Converting that to a total price was quite a letdown to the value of the acting method. Therefore, she added a little more from that benchmark. If Mr. Fool's adorer is no longer short of money, then I will take the £200, and I will look for the diary entries to repay my debt with Mr. Fool. Audrey had already thought of a follow-up deal. £200. The method to reduce the risk of losing control is 200 pounds. That's way too cheap, isn't it? Fearing that Justice would go back on her word, the surprised and happy Force said without hesitation, "Deal." After she finished speaking, she felt her heart pain for the money. She felt that her bank balance was decreasing at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. 313. The ancient deity's Audrey was about to apply for a private exchange when she suddenly discovered one thing. The world, who was seated at the other end of the long bronze table, didn't show any interest in the acting method at all. He didn't even have the urge to ask about it. Does he already know about the acting method, or did he consult Mr. Fool privately? Audrey mumbled to herself, still cautiously asking for a private meeting. Then looking at Force, she said in a measured voice in both her choice of words and pronunciation, "Our attitude towards potions isn't about grasping them, but rather it's about digesting them. The key to digestion is to act, and the key to acting is the corresponding potion name." "Why?" blurted Force. After a moment of deliberation, she added another question. "Then how should one act?" Audrey recalled Mr. Fool's pose and examples, repeating the description of the castle, the guards, the invitation, the disguise, and finally saying, "In short, the goal of acting is to reconcile the body, heart, and soul, bypassing the stubborn resistance of the remnant headstrong psyche of the potion so as to assimilate and digest it." As a fiction writer, Force had a strong imagination. After Justice was done with her description, she had already sketched out the corresponding scenes in her mind, and she had basically understood what Justice was trying to convey. "Is that so? So this is how you eliminate the remnant psyche influence in the potion and reduce the risk of losing control. The more I think about it, the more I feel that this is possible." The bewilderment in her mind gradually lessened, and the feeling of surprise slowly filled her heart. Finally, she asked for confirmation. "Was this taught by Mr. Fool?" "Yes, if not for Mr. Fool, we might have already lost control. Our continued existence is proof of the acting method's effectiveness," Justice praised from the bottom of her heart. "Phew," Force exhaled and felt her future brighten with hope. Could this be the fortuitous encounters described in all kinds of novels? This feels so good. However, I shouldn't be careless. Mr. Fool might be a malicious, evil god with deep secrets. Force reminded herself. Immediately, she began to think about an even more important question: how to act as an apprentice. Just from the word alone, apprentice means that one's skills are not mature enough in various aspects. Does this mean that one should still accept guidance and focus on studying? One shouldn't flaunt one's superiority and be arrogant, and one has to understand the insignificance of their own strength. Force quickly let her thoughts wander and didn't realize that the environment for individual communication had been discontinued. At that moment, the son, Derek, looked around silently, gritted his teeth and said, "I want to know which 7 gods you are talking about and the general situation regarding them." He couldn't help but ask this question that had been plaguing his mind for a long time. "I know that." Audrey almost failed to react at first, but she quickly figured out what the son was asking and raised her right hand slightly. At the same time, the hanged man and the world also indicated that they could answer. "What are they doing?" Force looked on blankly, trying to remember what had just happened. After a moment, she remembered the son's question. She then began ruminating over the implied meaning behind his words. It can't be. He actually doesn't know about the 7 gods. Where did he come from? Force looked at Mr. Sun, who was just a teenager. In the northern continent, other than insensible children, there wasn't anyone who didn't know of the 7 orthodox deities. Even the poor who struggled to survive, and the tramps were no exception. To them, the occasional free food offered by the cathedrals was so tempting that the workhouse was a flame of despair. People from the southern continent's colonies. However, there's no need for him to ask such a simple question. Just find a cathedral and ask a pastor or a priest to preach a sermon, and you'll be able to figure out the relevant content. Where does the sun actually live? What a freak! Fors looked from side to side while mumbling to herself, but Miss Justice, Mr. Hanged Man, and Mr. World weren't surprised. At that moment, the fog-immersed Klein saw that there were 3 people eager to answer. He smiled and said, "Mr. Sun, who do you want to trade with? What are you willing to pay?" The son Derek pursed his lips and thought for a few seconds. "I'll trade with each of them individually. Only then can I obtain the most comprehensive information in the harsh environment of the City of Silver." Derek had matured quite a bit from his previous patrols and clearance operations. He paused for a moment before requesting, "The reward is that you can ask me a question, the kind that I can answer." "I agree. I'm very interested in the City of Silver." Audrey smiled faintly without any hesitation. "City of Silver, where is this place? Why haven't I heard of it?" Fors looked around blankly, feeling completely at a loss as to what they were talking about. Audrey glanced at her and kindly explained, "Mr. Sun is neither in the northern or southern continent, nor is he on an island in the ocean. The City of Silver is located outside of our understanding, or you can say he is beyond the limits of our exploratory efforts." "Are you kidding me?" For subconsciously had this thought. However, with that thought, based on the sun's performance, and the fact that it was impossible that the others were ganging up to cheat her, Fors quickly accepted Audrey's explanation. "This secret gathering is even more incredible than I thought. Mr. Fool is more powerful than I thought." Fors exhaled silently and sighed with emotion. Audrey vaguely read her thoughts, and for a moment she was tempted to flaunt about how the deaths of Rear Admiral Kalangos, Inti's Ambassador Backerland, and the swindler Lanevis was a result of the Tarot Club. What a pity. If Fors were to learn of these 3 things, she would immediately associate Audrey with justice. "I have to keep it a secret, Audrey. Even if it's hard on you, you have to keep this a secret." Audrey suddenly took a deep breath. Since she didn't know much about the City of Silver, she didn't know what to ask. Fors didn't participate in the following transaction and chose to spectate from the sidelines. As for the Hanged Man and the World, they successively agreed to the Sun's request. The happiest of all was Klein, for this meant that he reaped thrice the rewards. During individual communication, the Fool could hear the conversation. Klein obviously didn't have any plans of insulating himself. "Son, you sure are simple." He laughed in his heart. As there was a lot of information about the 7 gods, justice, the Hanged Man, and the World could only write what they thought was important. After a while, they each passed on their descriptions to the Sun. Derek quickly scanned through the information, and his eyes stopped on a few lines. In addition to the Lord who created everything, the oldest gods are the eternal blazing sun, the Lord of storms, the God of knowledge and wisdom. Those churches were the oldest churches. Why haven't I heard of any of these? I've never heard of any of these gods. I feel like there's something very important hidden here. Derek knew that each Tarot Club gathering had a time limit, so he hastily ended his review, intending to go back and pray to Mr. Fool for help in awakening his memories. Then, the first one to raise a question was Justice. Due to the serial murder, she was interested in the devil sequence, so she imitated Mr. World and asked the appropriate questions. Derek answered with verve and added something. In the corresponding sequence 7, a beyonder of the Abyss Pathway can effectively interfere with divination and spirit channeling. A devil's powers sure are terrifying. I wonder if my sequence 7 psychiatrist will result in a qualitative change, or would I need to be sequence 6? Audrey felt a little apprehensive from what she heard. The second question came from the Hanged Man. He seemed to have considered this question for a long time. Looking at the sun, he opened his mouth and said in a deep voice, "I want to know the creation myth of the City of Silver." The slightly tense Derek relaxed a little and said, The omniscient and omnipotent God created everything and entered a state of deep slumber. Giant King Almir, the dragon of imagination Anquel, the elf king Soniathrim, the vampire ancestor Lilith, the devil monarch Farbody, the phoenix ancestor Gregrais, the mutated king K-Vaster, and the king of demonic wolves, Phlegrea split the remnant powers of authority, becoming lords of the sky, land, and ocean. They ruled over reality, the spirit world, and the astral world. They were deities who ruled over various races and were truly deities, the ancient gods. Phlegrea. Klein, who was listening, suddenly noticed a familiar word. Whenever he advanced, or when his condition was unstable, or when he came into contact with the remnant influence of the Antigonus family's diary, he would always hear some illusory, incomprehensible raving coming from somewhere. Hornesis, Phlegrea, Hornesis, Phlegrea, Hornesis, Phlegrea. Klein had known for a long time that Hornesis was referring to the mountain range where the ruins of the nation of the Evernight was, but he had never known what the word Phlegrea meant. And now, for the first time, he heard Phlegrea coming out of someone else's mouth. King of demonic wolves, an ancient deity. But why was he involved with the Hornesis mountain range? Klein maintained his unperturbed position as he quietly listened to Derek's recount. Some of them perished in the battle among themselves, while others were stripped of their power after the awakening of the Lord that created everything, the omnipotent and omniscient God. The first part is the creation myth, and the second part is about the City of Silver's true history. Alger wanted to know more, but as the son was unwilling to say more, he could only stop in time and turn his attention to thinking. The king of demonic wolves, Phlegrea, had left the stage of history in the second epoch, in the dark epoch long before the cataclysm. As he pondered, Klein manipulated the world to ask a question. What he had wanted to ask was which sequence allowed a Beyonder to freely switch between the body and the spirit, just as Miss Sharon did. If the son wasn't aware of the answer, he could consider something else. But now he had something more important to know about, so he hoarsely said, "Everything about the king of demonic wolves, Phlegrea." The son, Derek, looked at Mr. World in astonishment and frowned. "I don't know much about this ancient deity. He's also known as the Annihilation Demonic Wolf and the Evernight Demonic Wolf." Evernight Demonic Wolf, Evernight. Klein slightly narrowed his eyes. 314 possible. The nation of the Evernight, at the peak of the Hornesis mountain range, believed in the ruler of the Evernight. The mother of the sky. Is there some connection between that and the Evernight Demonic Wolf, Phlegrea? The illusory ravings I hear are actually Hornesis, Phlegrea. What is the connection between the ancient god, Evernight Demonic Wolf Phlegrea, and the goddess? According to Roselle, sequence 0 is equivalent to a true god, and each sequence can only have one sequence 0. The goddess had inherited the power from the Evernight Demonic Wolf. He wasn't the oldest deity, nor was he the eye of the creator as he claimed. Yes, there's a circumstantial clue that doesn't count as proof. The life school of thought worships the moon, the crimson moon that evolved from the creator's eye, but they don't believe in the Evernight goddess. Klein suddenly made several connections as he manipulated the world to speak. Is there nothing else? No. Matters regarding the king of demonic wolves, Phlegrea, is also considered a myth in the City of Silver. Derek felt as though he had not given any answers. He suggested out of embarrassment, "Mr. World, you can change to another question." "Change the question." "Little son, you're too honest. Then I won't stand on ceremony." Klein made the world say hoarsely, "Your honesty and trustworthiness leave a deep impression. I met a Beyonder before. He was able to freely switch between the body and spirit, and they were also able to direct zombies. Do you know which pathway this belongs to and which sequence it is?" Although it was impossible for the son, who was located in the forsaken land of the gods and the city of Silver, to form a connection with the capital of the Lone Kingdom, Backlund. Klein was cautious enough to change the pronoun referring to Miss Sharon from she to he. By the way, he's not a high-sequence Beyonder, the world added in a deep voice. Derek recalled the education he had received seriously before saying, if he's not a high-sequence Beyonder, then the Phoenix Pathway can be eliminated. The Phoenix Pathway. Klein deliberately made the world show a certain level of surprise. After attending so many gatherings, Derek was very clear that there was a discrepancy between the terms used by the City of Silver and Miss Justice and Company. Therefore, Derek explained without finding it strange. It's the Beyonder Pathway that governs death and partly controls the spirit world. Its sequence 9 is Corpse Collector, so it's the Death Pathway. From the looks of it, Phoenix ancestor Greggrace was death during the ancient times. Klein sat at the end of the long bronze table in a composed manner. He controlled world as he nodded. I understand. You can continue. Derek replied immediately. I can only think of two possibilities. One is a type of special devil. Just like I previously said, the devils that evolve from different species can have their differences. There is a type that can freely switch between body and spirit, but they're rather rare, and they might not be able to direct zombies. Can they be humans? The world asked. No, not that I know of any similar examples, Derek said honestly. What about the second possibility? Klein thought back to Miss Sharon's usual performance in battle, and the world changed his sitting position. Derek replied seriously, mutants. Mutants? Isn't that referring to monsters? The world asked hoarsely. Klein clearly remembered that Mr. Azek had mentioned that the term mutant was the general term for humans that were put under a curse. Due to the different curses, mutants transformed into different races. They were usually the same as humans, but their hearts were always filled with a suppressed, twisted desire in their hearts. Their desires erupted when they came into contact with a certain scene or object, turning into monsters. They would then succumb to their desires for blood and bloodshed. Every time they unleashed their desires, they would become slightly more merciless and apathetic. Finally, they would lose all their positive feelings that are expected of a human. The most common mutant was the werewolf. Derek nodded frankly and said, "That's right. Mutants are the various kinds of monsters that evolve from humans due to the negative effects of certain Beyonder characteristics. It's not a curse, but the negative impact of some Beyonder characteristic." Sitting upright in the thick gray fog, Klein found this to be different from what Mr. Azek had described. Is this the understanding of mutants from before the cataclysm? General knowledge in the City of Silver is quite precious to the Beyonders of the northern and southern continents. Klein became increasingly aware of the special nature of the forsaken land of the gods. At this moment, Derek continued, the characteristics which mutants possess happen to form a Beyonder pathway. Therefore, ordinary people can turn into mutants by consuming potions as well. A mutant pathway. Which pathway is this referring to? What is the name of the corresponding sequence 9? Klein asked curiously through the world. Derek ignored the first few questions, treating them as a necessary supplement. In the City of Silver, the corresponding sequence 9 is called prisoner. The mind is the prisoner of the body, and the body is the prisoner of the world. This refers to the madness that is restrained and the desire that is oppressed. Prisoner. This pathway is held by the Rose School of Thought. They're famous for their bloody sacrifices and worship of the so-called chained god. Miss Sharon doesn't look like such a cold-blooded, indiscriminate person. Wait a minute. Marek was apparently being pursued by some faction. Were he and Miss Sharon traitors of the Rose School of Thought? Their betrayal was because they didn't want to turn into crazy heretics. Klein speculated as he made the world say, "I'm very satisfied with your answer. Transaction complete." Following that, a few members shared their experiences and news. As for Klein, he ended the tarot gathering just before his spirituality was exhausted. When the area above the gray fog returned to its peaceful state, even the fake world was gone. He then started to travel back and forth between the real world and the mysterious space, bringing the master key to the ancient palace. Although I deduced from Roselle's diary that there is a high probability that there isn't a sequence 0 for the apprentice pathway, I can't be rash. If there is a sequence 1 or 2, they might be able to counterattack effectively across space. And what if there really is a sequence 0? I shouldn't gamble with my life. After Klein recovered, he wrote a divination statement. Its origin. Next, he held the master key in his hand so as not to misdirect the moniker it. Leaning back in his chair, Klein chanted the divination statement and gradually fell asleep. In the gray haze of the shattered world, he saw a bronze lamp rack with many flickering candles. Around the lamp rack was what seemed to be a secret room, devoid of any external light. There were long tables, black iron pots, glass jars, brown-colored notebooks, and other items. A young man wearing a classic black robe stood in front of the long table, staring at the potion in his hand. Ancestors, I am about to embark on the path of extraordinariness. I will definitely reproduce the illustrious glory of the Abraham family, he mumbled to himself and drank the potion. The muscles on his face contorted in pain. Suddenly, he cried out miserably and fell to the ground. He squirmed continuously, strangling himself. After a few seconds, he tore off his clothes, stripped off his skin, and turned into a monster covered in blood. Boom! His flesh exploded, and each piece of flesh seemed to possess a life of its own as they continued to crawl in every direction, leaving behind signs of corrosion. In the end, they were unable to leave the secret chamber and gradually calmed down. The specks of light gathered together and combined together with a broken finger, forming an ancient and simple-looking brass-colored key. At the same time, Klein saw a silver pocket watch inlaid with diamonds among the tattered clothes. After the dream ended, he opened his eyes and looked forward. He said with a sigh, seriously, he said he wanted to restore the glory of the Abraham family, but he failed at the first step. It's risky even at sequence 9. The Abraham family was a powerful aristocratic family of the Tudor dynasty during the 4th epoch. It was said that they held the beyonder pathway of apprentice, but it was very likely that it was incomplete. Klein recalled the scene he had just seen. He tapped his fingers on the edge of the table and muttered to himself. He spoke in the Lone language. I can't tell where his accent is from. It was during the last 10 years since it became popular to embed pure diamonds into pocket watches. Perhaps I should visit the Harvest Church when I have the time and ask Father Otravsky where he got his master key from. Perhaps I can find some clues. Just as Klein was about to leave the fog, the illusory star that symbolized the magician began to swell and contract. Fors was requesting a sacrificial ritual. Fors usually wouldn't have carried so much cash on her, but she had been planning to attend a beyonder gathering, so she had left £500 to see if she could buy what she wanted. Who knew that the corresponding gathering had been cancelled because of the circumstances? Now she could use it to pay for the apothecary formula and the acting method, a total of £430. Seeing the screen of light appear and seeing the paper money disappear, it took Fors a few seconds to react. She sincerely thanked Mr. Fool. I shall sell the apothecary formula to Viscount Glaint for £300. I can't be too greedy, or else this will ruin our long-term partnership. As for Miss Audrey, I'll ignore her for the time being. She has hopes of coming into contact with the psychology alchemists and obtaining the corresponding formula directly. If there's really no hope with that, I'll try purchasing it from the tarot gathering. I have to see if the acting method is effective. If it is, then I have to consider how to pray to Mr. Fool. Oh, Zio is such a fool. She has always been acting as an arbiter and had unknowingly fulfilled the requirements of the acting method, for as began thinking of the future. When he received the £430, Klein also received a prayer from Miss Justice. She said that if Mr. Fool's adorer no longer needed cash, she could promise to exchange the £200 for Roselle's diary entries to make sure that Mr. Fool was satisfied. "I'm satisfied. I'm only a few dozen pounds short of £1,000. Klein declined Miss Justice's offer. Then he busily helped the son awaken his memories regarding the 7 gods. After doing all this, Klein returned to the real world in exhaustion. He drew the curtains open and started going through the dossier with the information regarding the serial murders, searching for the animal that might have existed. 315 returned to Harvest Church City of Silver in a cramped room. Derek Berg was sitting by his bedside, quietly recalling the information regarding the 7 gods that he had received. The names of the deities that he had never heard of and the vague ancient myths all indicated to him that there was a new world outside which was completely different from the City of Silver. Is that a piece of land that hasn't been forsaken by the gods? Or perhaps it's a land that is protected by new gods? Derek sat in the dark, motionlessly. Lightning flashed from time to time outside the window, bringing with it intense light. He slowly focused his thoughts on the different powers that were concentrated in the hands of the 7 gods, and he compared them with the ancient gods such as the dragon of imagination, Ankwelt. The so-called god of combat is very similar to giant King Almir. The Lord of Storms wields power similar to the elf king, Soniathrim. The Evernight goddess appears to be the fusion of the king of demonic wolves, Phlegria, and vampire ancestor, Lilith. As for the eternal blazing sun, Mother Earth, god of knowledge and wisdom and god of steam and machinery, I can't find anyone corresponding to them. Regarding the mythical legends, I wasn't too attentive in class and missed out a lot few. Since there's no patrol duty during this period of time, I should head to the Spire's library and read up on them. Derek stood up and did as he planned. The problem he faced was shared by the majority of the residents in the City of Silver. When they were being educated with general knowledge, their focus was all on the practical courses such as devil studies, monster classification, charms, and Beyonder foundations. They were all focused on the knowledge that could be used to deal with monsters in the dark and increase the production of edible plants. As for supplementary classes like myth studies, they often didn't pay much attention. If the history regarding the City of Silver hadn't been able to make the residents more united, raise their sense of honor, or heighten their sense of mission, and how the 6-member council was very strict in this regard, Derek believed that he could at most remember what had happened in the last 2 or 3 decades. Carrying the axe of Hurricane, Derek walked out of his house, following the clean, simple, but old and mottled stone road until he reached the Twin Towers on the north side of the city. One of the spires of the Twin Towers served as the City of Silver's library, an exchange spot where merit points could be exchanged and daily necessities could be distributed. The dome was where the 6-member council resided, and was rumored to contain a mystical item which had sustained the City of Silver for more than 2,000 years, as well as a repository for formulas and ingredients. Entering the spire, Derek went straight up to the 3rd floor and, according to his recollections, found the shelves where materials regarding mythology and the corresponding ancient books were stored. Just as he was about to take out a book related to the creation myth, a slender, fair-skinned, and good-looking palm rushed forward and took the book away from him. Derek traced the arm, and after a single glance he lowered his head, pressed his hand to his chest, and said in a low voice, "Greetings, Elder Lovia." The one who had taken the book from him was one of the members of the 6-member council, Shepherd Lovia. She wore a long black robe embroidered with mysterious purple patterns. Her silvery gray hair was thick but curled up slightly. Her face was smooth and fair, her appearance gorgeous. She looked to be in her early 30s, and her pair of light gray eyes seemed to be able to pierce through one's soul. Lovia tersely acknowledged Derek's greeting and gently nodded her head without saying anything else. She silently took the ancient book and left the space between the two bookshelves. Elder Lovia seems to have returned to normal. She's not like before, always switching between different temperaments at random, sometimes crying, sometimes sneering, sometimes grunting angrily, sometimes indifferent. Such a thought subconsciously flashed across Derek's mind. Suddenly, he felt an inexplicable sense of fear. It was because Elder Lovia was acting normally normal. After reading through the entire dossier, Klein found no record of any animals. It was obvious that the original investigation had overlooked this problem. Yea, I have to remember my earlier considerations. I can't rashly perform my own investigations. Without talking about how I don't have the special means or confidence to avoid a devil's intuition towards danger, just the possibility of me meeting a nighthawk would be a very troublesome matter. My goal is to always take an auxiliary role. My job is to analyze the case and suggest conjectures and determine if a clue is authentic. Klein considered what he needed to do. After understanding the abilities of a devil, he temporarily didn't dare to hand over the matter of investigating whether or not the previous suspects had pets to Stewart. That would have a high chance of injuring Stewart. It's only in the preliminary stage of investigations without any direction. It's likely Stewart wouldn't encounter any problems. A devil isn't like those bunch of lunatics from the Aurora Order. He wouldn't proactively expose himself. Tomorrow or the day after, Stewart will definitely hand in a report. Perhaps there might be clues that others might not be able to detect. Klein stood up and stuffed his hands into his pockets as he paced around the activity room. Now, his dilemma was on how to get the main investigation body to include animals under their radar. I definitely can't mention it directly, as that would attract the suspicion of others. It would be the same if I attempted to guide them in the dark. Klein thought carefully as he weighed the matter seriously before finally deciding on a plan. He pulled out a letter, grabbed a fountain pen, and wrote, "Dear Mr. Stanton, I thought of a problem. Previously, when the detectives were in discussion, they all found the murderer's actions skilled without any hint of inexperience. They believed that he couldn't be born with such skill, and that he must have had a lot of experience to build up his foundation. Examples of such people can be surgical students from med school or a butcher. Back then, I thought he might have done something like this before. It's a direction for investigation, and it's what I'm paying the most attention to right now. But after thinking about it over and over again for the past 2 days, I don't think it's comprehensive enough. Perhaps he didn't rely on killing people to gain experience. Is it possible that he practiced with poor animals, different kinds of living animals? The number of animals that die in Backland daily is innumerable, and those that disappear in the sewers are also unknown. Therefore, these are very good training targets. This is my inchoate opinion. I hope to communicate with you." Sherlock Moriarty. Klein didn't directly mention that the murderer might have been an animal that had turned into a devil. He also used the reason of practice, hoping that Isengard Stanton would take note of the neglected animal world, thereby reminding the official Beyonders responsible for the case. While he was writing, he suddenly felt that this was also a direction. The reason why the devil hadn't been caught all this time was because it had been hunting animals most of the time, and the hunting of animals wasn't something worth paying attention to. Well, let's hope it will inspire them. Klein folded the letter and dressed up to deliver it to the mailbox at the end of the street. 15 minutes later, Lawyer Jurgen, who saw Detective Sherlock passing by his oriel window again and again, finally couldn't stop his urge to open his door and asked politely, "Mr. Moriarty, did you forget your key?" Sort of." Klein squeezed out a smile. "Why don't you come to my house as a guest? After dinner, you can go back after dark. I know that you private detectives are very good at climbing." Jurgen invited him in with a serious expression. Seriously. Klein was stunned for a second before he smiled sincerely. "It's my honor." After all, Lawyer Jurgen's grandmother had the standard of a capable chef, and he could also tease the cat while he was there. When it was completely dark, Klein, having had his fill, rested for a while at home before leaving Minsk Street with his cane. He planned to make another trip to Rose Street, on the south side of the bridge, and ask Bishop Otravsky about the origin of the master key. With the help of dowsing rod seeking, he successfully arrived at the Harvest Church in the dead of night and sneaked in through the same route as before. However, Bishop Otravsky wasn't repenting in the cathedral's hall tonight. There were only rows of pews in the silence and gloom. "He's resting." Klein felt slightly puzzled as he walked towards the living area at the back of the hall. As he rounded the corner, he saw the tall, giant-like Bishop Otravsky walking up the basement stairs. The heavy stone doors situated there were being banged on by someone. Who did he detain in the basement? Klein instantly thought of a series of warped ideas. Bishop Otravsky looked up and saw Klein disguised the same as before. He was also surprised as he asked, "Haven't you found your way home yet?" "Do I look like someone who's been lost for so long?" Klein forced a smile. "Father, I'm not lost." "You think that the formula is fake? That's impossible." Bishop Otravsky frowned and stopped midway up the stairs. As a result, he was at the same height as Klein. "No, it's genuine," Klein answered honestly. At this moment, the basement stone door was thumped again with ever-increasing intensity. Along with the thumps was a male voice that shouted, "Let me out." "This is," Klein couldn't help but ask. Bishop Otravsky smiled warmly and said, "A vampire." As soon as he finished, the man in the basement shouted, "What's wrong with being a vampire? Do you think vampires should be locked up here? Do I have to listen to your nagging and scripture recitals every day?" "Bullshit, I'm a noble sanguine, so don't use such a vulgar name to describe me. Let me tell you, I worship the moon and I'll absolutely not convert to a believer of Mother Earth. Give up, you damned priest." It was Klein's first time meeting a real vampire, so he couldn't help but ask, "Father, where did you catch him?" Bishop Otravsky gave Klein an odd look before saying, "He is the original owner of the master key. One day he got lost and entered this cathedral." Klein seriously considered the dilemma of whether he should carry the master key with him in the future or not. "It's a good thing that I can divine," he thought thankfully. It just so happened that he had entered a state where he thirsted for blood, and I had discovered his abnormality, Bishop Otravsky added with a smile. "Bullshit, don't talk about blood. What I need is the blood of a beautiful young girl, not the blood of a dirty old man like you." The vampire in the basement suddenly became enraged. Bishop Otravsky explained without a trace of anger, "When he craves blood, I will give him some of mine." Klein nodded and looked again. He found that the heavy stone door in the basement was engraved with the sacred emblem of life and many mysterious symbols, forming a complete seal. During the day, when more and more people start praying, it would be impossible for the sound to even reach the outside. Klein made a preliminary judgment. "Is there anything I can help you with?" At that moment, Bishop Otravsky asked. Klein answered frankly, "I want to know where the master key first came from." "You'll have to ask him." Bishop Otravsky pointed to the basement. The vampire inside suddenly became quiet before he leisurely laughed and said, "Friend, I can answer your question, but the condition is that you rescue me first." Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com 316. Never perform unprepared. He actually named his price. Upon hearing the vampire's request, Klein felt both irritated and amused. He looked at the Bishop Otravsky, who was standing in front of him, and asked, "Father, may I borrow your candle? The one that you used last time, I've forgotten what it's called." Before Bishop Otravsky could reply, the vampire in the basement spoke in a stunned voice. "What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" At this moment, Bishop Otravsky answered warmly, "It's called the mental terror candle. What are you borrowing it for?" "Father, you're very cooperative. You even knew to ask." The corners of Klein's mouth curled up. "I plan to use it to directly inquire the deepest part of this friend's heart. As you know, I'm quite talented in this area, and I'm very good at such matters." Before he could finish his sentence, the vampire in the basement had already shouted, "Bastard, give up on your idea. You will be cursed if you do this to a noble sanguine." "Hey, hey, hey, I'll speak. I'll speak. I'll tell you the origins of the master key." Klein immediately chuckled. "Thank you for your cooperation. HMPH. The friend of that dirty old man naturally isn't a good person. As a sanguine, all I did was go to the hospital to steal blood bottles to drink. Why did I end up locked up in here and forced to listen to this naggy, housefly-like Bible of life?" The vampire in the basement angrily complained. "Frankly speaking, if you really are who you claim to be, and you bumped into me at most, I would give you a warning. Unfortunately, you got lost and entered this cathedral. The priest you encountered used to kill people wantonly and enjoyed combat, but he's now pious and repentant. You can only blame your poor luck, however. With Bishop Otravsky's recovery, he's unlikely to hurt you. At most, he will keep you to his side." Klein silently responded. The vampire in the basement paused for a few seconds and said, "About a month ago, I went to the hospital in South Borough to steal blood and ended up meeting a thief. He originally wanted to enter the hospital's finance department, but he ended up lost. He opened the door to the blood bank and ended up being caught by me. He was using that master key. He told me that he had found it back when he had burgled a particular house. He had also obtained a pocket watch with inlaid diamonds, in the basement. At first, he thought that the key would correspond to a room or safe. He made several attempts and found that the key could open all doors. This is no doubt an unimaginable surprise for a thief. After that, he enjoyed numerous successes until I caught him and confiscated his key. Damn, I didn't expect that the key would make one get lost back then. It matches the scene I saw with my divination, however. Is there a curse on the master key? The previous owner was detained because he got lost, and the owner before that was caught red-handed because he got lost. Perhaps I should really throw it into the space above the gray fog and take it out when I need it. But that will be a lot more troublesome and might cause delays to certain matters." Klein controlled his expression and asked unhurriedly, "Did the thief say where he stole it?" The vampire in the basement mumbled, "Are you doubting my intelligence? How could I not ask about this? He said it was in the area south of the bridge, 48 River Bay Avenue. I was planning to check it out when, damn it." "All right, I'm done answering. Don't disturb me anymore." Klein didn't leave just because he received an answer. Instead, he slowly took out a halfpence copper coin and recited softly, "He's lying." After repeating it 7 times, Klein's eyes turned dark and he flicked the coin up. He watched it spin in the air before it landed in the palm of his hand. It was heads, indicating a positive response. In other words, the vampire was lying. The thief's description coincides greatly with what I had seen through divination, so they confirm each other. The vampire must have lied about the exact address. Klein looked at Bishop Otravsky and said with a chuckle, "He lied. Let me think about the reason why he lied. It would be very unwise of him to vent his anger and seek revenge on me, who is completely uninvolved. It would also be very detrimental to his situation. So, I think he's actually using this method to call for help. That address might very well belong to a companion of his father. Do you plan on paying a visit?" The basement suddenly fell silent. After a few seconds, the vampire laughed and said, I just didn't want to tell you that easily. You threatened me just now, so I lied to take revenge on you. Isn't that normal? I can hear how forceful you are at trying to calm yourself down. Klein smiled and said, then what's the real answer? If you continue lying, I don't mind sending this address to the 3 churches. I'll just say that it has something to do with the recent serial murders. Humans are really vicious. The vampire sighed through gritted teeth. The area south of the bridge, 32 Verde Street. Klein tossed the coin again and got the result that the vampire wasn't lying. It seems like vampires don't have the ability to interfere with divination, I should confirm it above the gray fog when I'm back. Klein pressed his hand to his chest, faced the heavy stone door, and bowed. Thank you for your cooperation. HMPH, the vampire in the basement snappily replied. As Klein turned to leave, the vampire suddenly shouted, remember that my name is Emlyn White. Remember, my name is Emlyn White. Why do I have to remember your name? It's not like I'm going to save you. Without preparation, and without a home-ground advantage, I'm no match for Father Otravsky, and he has the mystical item to transfuse blood. Could it be that this vampire's companion will offer a bounty, and he wishes for me to sell this information? Klein was surprised for a moment before he walked out of the Harvest Church without a word. After finding a secluded place, he undid the spirit pendulum wound around his left wrist and started to divine if he should visit 32 Verde Street at that very moment. The answer he got was that there was some danger, but it wasn't too high. There is certain danger. Where's the danger? What kind of danger would it be? Klein carefully analyzed the situation, suspecting that the apprentice who died from losing control had turned into a ghost-type monster due to its intense grievance. Furthermore, it was a relatively strong one at that. That's not right. That thief clearly came out with the master key without encountering any trouble. Could it be that the danger is in another secret location in the house? Klein thought for a moment and decided that it would be best for him to go only when he was sufficiently prepared. It prevented him from entering a situation in which he encountered an enemy whom he was unable to deal with his present Beyonder powers. At the very least, I'll have to wait until I buy bullets that can purify Wraith shadows. He nodded slightly. After this consideration, combined with his previous battle with Dawn Paladin Bishop Otravsky, Klein suddenly felt that he could vaguely conclude the first rule of a magician: never perform unprepared. Doing otherwise would result in a high chance of messing up, Klein added silently. On Tuesday morning, after preparing butter and toasting 2 slices of bread, Klein was in no hurry to eat. He opened the door and retrieved the day's newspaper from the mailbox. There's a letter. He pulled the letter out from the newspaper and glanced at the envelope as he returned to the dining room. It's from Stuart. It appears that he has already completed his preliminary investigations. Klein nodded slightly, tore open the envelope, shook the piece of paper, and sat down at the dining table as he read it. Stuart claimed that the 2 suspects had shown no signs of abnormal behavior. One of them entrenched himself at the grocery store and guarded his wife and children, living a lifeless life, while the other was busy with various temporary jobs and working hard to maintain his life. They were not irritable, nor did they have the urge to fight. They also didn't lock themselves up in a room. At the end of the letter, Stuart lamented the harsh situation in East Borough and vowed to save enough money to avoid being reduced to staying there when he was old. Thank you for your help. I will share my findings with the rest of you if there are any other clues. Klein replied to the letter simply when he saw how Stuart had no signs of being discovered. He didn't want Stuart to delve deeper into the case, or else the devil might detect the danger and kill any latent dangers in advance. Putting away his pen and paper, Klein picked up a piece of bread that had already been soaked in butter and leisurely spent his breakfast with a cup of black tea and the newspaper. During this process, He felt rather regretful that there were no signs that the Beyonder gathering organized by old Mr. Eye of Wisdom would be held. Sigh, the existence of this devil has seriously affected the lives of the Backland Beyonders. I hope Mr. Isengard Stanton is able to notice my hint and be fruitful. Yes, he should be a recognized Beyonder by the officials. Klein put down the newspaper and picked up a napkin to wipe his mouth before he packed up to leave. His plan today had been already decided last week. He was to visit the Royal Museum for the Emperor Roselle Memorial Exhibition. In Empress Borough, the opulent villa of Count Hall, Audrey was wearing a light lace dress and donned snow-white fur as she waited for her personal maidservant, Anne, to help her put on a soft hat with pearls and a thin fishnet veil. Beside her, Susie sat there with a bow tied around her neck. "My beautiful little princess, where do you plan on going?" Count Hall asked, stroking his fine mustache as he descended the stairs. Audrey's eyes replied with bright eyes, "Father, I plan to attend the Roselle Memorial Exhibition. I can take a look at the original diary of Emperor Roselle and find a chance to get some for Mr. Fool," she added in her mind. Count Hall muttered to himself, "Why are you going today? There will be a lot of people, and the scene will be very chaotic. Yes, I'll get someone to coordinate with the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. After the official exhibition is over, they'll open its doors specially for you and your friends for half a day. That way, you can have a quiet and undisturbed tour. If you have anything you wish to look at closely, you can discuss it with them directly. In that the case, that seems even better. I can directly look through the diaries in this exhibition." Audrey lifted her skirt and curtsied. "Thank you, handsome Count Hall tilde. 317 Roselle Memorial Exhibition, West Borough, 2 Kings Avenue, Royal Museum." Although it wasn't a weekend, there was a long line at the door when Klein arrived. According to the descriptions in the newspapers and magazines, he knew that the world's middle class had fewer ways of entertaining themselves. Other than reading newspapers, reading novels, listening to opera concerts, playing tennis and squash, enjoying plays and holding or attending banquets, there were only 3 options: going to a park, going to an exhibition, and going on vacation. Due to Emperor Roselle's influence, annual vacations were already common phenomena. At 9 o'clock sharp, Klein, who was wearing a silk top hat, a black cane, and a long double-breasted frock coat, followed the people in front of him and entered the museum. There was a split here, and the different guides led a number of visitors down different passages. Klein and nearly 20 people followed a good-looking woman and listened to her introduction of Roselle's life. This was of zero value to Klein, who was half a historian, so he was so bored that he began confirming the location of his wallet. Since his wealth had soared to £952, just a step away from £1,000, his wallet could no longer hold so much cash, and he could only carry some of it selectively. As for the rest, Klein didn't feel at ease to just leave them at home without protection, so he threw them all above the gray fog. As they walked, they entered the first exhibition hall. The female guide excitedly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, these are the daily necessities of Emperor Roselle. Look, that's his velvet quilt, and that's the golden glassware he used to drink his wine. That's the toilet he used, the first toilet in the modern sense. Even a toilet he had used before is being exhibited." Klein suddenly felt some sympathy for Roselle. Then he looked at the toilet with a flushing system behind the glass wall and saw that it was shimmering with golden light. It seemed to have a layer of gold foil on its surface, and it was engraved with an exaggerated and artistic pattern. How extravagant! Klein no longer sympathized with Roselle. Separated from the toilet by only a glass layer was Roselle's everyday clothing, including cuffs, a shirt with pleats at the collar, and so on. It was obvious that the female guide was rather impressed by Inti's dress culture. After the Daily Necessities exhibition hall, There was a display of the original versions of the important documents which Roselle had issued, including the Civil Code and other extremely valuable historical relics. At that moment, the female guide pointed at a display cabinet and said, "This is one of the diaries left behind by Emperor Roselle. It uses his self-created mysterious symbols that have yet to be deciphered to date. Many historians and archaeologists believe that these notes contain the least known secrets of Emperor Roselle. As a romantic, I have my own guesses. Perhaps these are the symbols he had agreed upon with his most beloved woman. They wrote about each other but were never able to truly be together. You're suited for writing novels." The corner of Klein's mouth twitched. His eyes then turned to the notebook that was spread open in the display cabinet. On it were the simplified Chinese he was extremely familiar with. 6th March. Damn it, I'm almost constipated from eating the food here. 17th March. Are the ladies of Intis so open? Did I hit on her or did she hit on me? I just find it odd. 22nd March. It's time to choose a religion. On one side is the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun, and on the other is the Church of Craftsmanship. My choice is without a doubt. Praise you, God of all machinery. One day, I will make the Church of Craftsmanship change its name to the Church of Machinery. It's indeed very romantic constipation. This should be a diary entry written by Emperor Roselle in his early days. It's without any valuable information. His handwriting is even uglier than mine." Klein looked away and tusked. Of course, he only saw the 2 pages that were spread open. He didn't know what else was on it. I wonder how the security measures here are. I wonder if there is a chance of sneaking in and flipping through them. Klein looked around and saw that there were quite a few security personnel on the surface. Perhaps there are beyonders from the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. He muttered under his breath and followed the female guide as he blended in with the crowd. He entered the next exhibition hall, which was called The Gentle Roselle. This is Emperor Roselle's first love letter. This is his first love poem he created when you are old. The female guide looked at the manuscript in the display cabinet with glimmering eyes. Shameless. Yeats' coffin can't be held shut any longer. Klein couldn't help but lampoon. This is a bracelet he made. This is the original manuscript of his novel, the female guide introduced with a tone of extraordinary adoration. Klein tried hard not to let his expression change. Of course, he also believed that Emperor Roselle, who was an artisan in his beyonder profession, was definitely very skilled in his craftsmanship. This is the basic education textbook that he improved to educate his children. Each word has its own corresponding picture. It was a little game he had invented for his children, similar to Inti's chess, but somehow it didn't become popular. These are the toy blocks he invented. These were also for his children, the female guide said in a gentle tone without even realizing it. Isn't this fucking Chinese chess? Furthermore, Lego wants to collect the licensing fees from you. Klein could only smirk to hide his other emotions. With a single glance, he noticed that there was a woman over 1.7 meters tall standing in front of this display cabinet. The lady had chestnut hair that fell to her waist, and she had a perfectly proportioned figure. She was neither fat nor thin. She wore a lace dress which had the vibes of a young girl, but she wore a black, out-of-fashion bonnet, and a fishnet veil hung down, concealing her face. She stood in front of the display cabinet and stared at the items inside for a long time without leaving. Even when Klein and the others followed the guide to the next exhibition hall, she remained rooted to the spot. After passing through a few more exhibition halls, the female guide pointed ahead and said, "The next thing you will see is Emperor Roselle's restored study. Of course, it's only a part of it." As she spoke, Klein and the others entered the exhibition hall as the area before them opened up. It was almost like a library, lined with shelves which were 2 stories high. There were ladders sitting beneath them and aisles between them leading to a 3-dimensional book park. You can imagine how the owner of this place had once climbed up and down the ladder in search of the book that he wanted to read. The guide painted a vivid picture. No, Roselle would definitely send his servants to seek it out for him. He wouldn't do it himself. Klein silently refuted. In the center of the row of bookshelves were desks, chairs, brass lampstands, and the like. They were all protected under the cover of glass and were blocked from making contact with the outside world. With a single glance, Klein found a stack of manuscripts which were all yellow in color. The stack of manuscripts weren't spread out, so one could only see the contents of the first page. It was a drawing of a rectangular object with a detailed description. This is a portable, miniaturized application of the telegraph. Through it, one can connect to the person holding the same item and receive and exchange information. You can even converse with them directly. This requires better positioning. I think we can boldly cast our sights to the sky. There are no obstructions in the sky, and it would allow for better transmission of signals. Emperor, you aren't even letting go of a cell phone. Klein couldn't help but facepalm. At that moment, the guide introduced the stack of manuscripts. These record the wonderful ideas of Emperor Roselle. They record inventions which he was unable to turn into reality in time. They record the glory of what our human civilization is capable of. Klein didn't pay any attention to the flattery, and instead casually sized up the other things. Suddenly, he noticed a bookmark in a hardcover book on the desk. The exposed part of the bookmark depicted a drawing which was randomly drawn by a child. Emperor Roselle isn't good at drawing, just as Klein was mocking inwardly. He suddenly thought of something. Roselle had once disguised a card of blasphemy as a bookmark and placed it inside a certain book. Could it be this one? Klein carefully observed for a few seconds, but he didn't find anything amiss. That's right. He had mentioned before that the cards of blasphemy possess anti-divination and anti-prophecy characteristics. Under normal circumstances, there's no way to discover their uniqueness. If it were so easily recognized, the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery would have long taken it away. Klein cast his gaze away and began scrutinizing the other books. He discovered that many of them had a bookmark in them, and all of these bookmarks were of different shapes. He pondered for a moment, and using his clown's ability to control his facial muscles, he curiously asked, "Are these all books that Emperor Roselle has read before?" "Sorry, I mean, are these the original books?" The female guide nodded firmly. "Yes, these are all the items from Emperor Roselle's study from back then. They include, but are not limited to, books, manuscripts, bookmarks, lampstands, ink bottles, but even more were destroyed during the several conflicts." Klein nodded slightly and studied the bookmarks again. Roselle had said in his diary that he was going to put the card of blasphemy in a very valuable book, so that no one would ever think that the most valuable thing in that book was actually an obscure bookmark. Well, which of these books are valuable? Klein began eliminating books as he recalled the details written in the diary. Glorious Era doesn't look like it. The History of the Inti's Kingdom doesn't look like it. Geography of the Northern Continent, this might be possible, but it isn't very likely. The Improved Principles of Steam Machinery. Just like before, Klein scanned the books one by one when his eyes suddenly came to rest on the first pile of manuscripts he saw. They were recording objects from Earth, objects which Roselle had wanted to invent but lacked the conditions to do so. There was also a bookmark in it, and on it, there was a depiction of Roselle in Royal Emperor Clothes poem by William Butler Yeats. 318 verification his manuscripts of plagiarism. No, his manuscript of creativity should be considered a very valuable book. Could that bookmark be a card of blasphemy? Klein's heart skipped a beat, lightly tapped his molars, and quietly activated his spirit vision. However, he didn't find anything abnormal. He then scanned the other bookmarks and obtained the same answer. That's right, if it's that easy to detect it, It wouldn't have remained till this day for me to have this thought. Klein deactivated his spirit vision, and once again he thought via method of elimination, based on the details he had learned from Roselle's diary and the personality the Emperor had shown. As far as he could tell, since Roselle had said that the book with the card of blasphemy was valuable, it couldn't be too ordinary, or it wouldn't satisfy his sense of warped humor to use lots of valuable knowledge to serve as a foil for an unobtrusive bookmark would be a form of teasing the recipient of the book. Thus, books with value but aren't of great value can be ignored. In that case, Klein looked around, trying to make sense of it, completely turning a deaf ear to what the guide was saying. In summary, in the entire study, the only book that fulfills these conditions is that manuscript of creativity. The others are only ordinary in value. With Roselle's personality, he definitely wouldn't choose them. Yes, Roselle is the kind of person who would claim, "I'll hide the secret in the most obvious place, but none of you can find it." As Klein imagined this, he added a cackling expression to the Emperor in his mind. Of course, there's no way he could confirm that the bookmark was the disguised card of blasphemy, because the books Roselle had, which were of great value, clearly included those in the field of mysticism. And those books were definitely not going to be put on display by the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. Yes, I have to first confirm if it's the card of blasphemy before considering if I should take action. Unfortunately, I can't use the date 20th January as a method of elimination. No one knows which bookmark is placed into which book on which day. Klein silently muttered to himself and turned to look towards the guide. He asked with a smile, "Do the books on the shelf also have things stuffed in between them? For example, a note written by some noble lady to Roselle?" This question made many men give a knowing chuckle. The female guide shook her head and said, "No, there aren't any. The books that contain other items have all been taken out and placed here for everyone to see. This is just a restoration of Emperor Roselle's study, not the restoration of a particular point in time. There is no need to maintain an immutable state." Klein laughed and said immediately, "I understand. This sure is disappointing. That's simply great. There's only one bookmark in the entire exhibition hall that requires verification. The difficulty has greatly fallen," he added happily in his heart. As the guide introduced Roselle's favorite books, Klein looked around the room again, taking in the overall layout. To restore the room from more than a century ago, there were no gas lamps around the room. The lighting mainly relied on the iron-barred oriel windows that were a few meters away and the huge crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. As for the brass lamp on the desk, there were no candles installed. It was purely a decoration. Looking out the oriel window, Klein saw the yellow, withered lawn and a straight, iron-black lamppost. He took note of the location and turned his attention back to the book the female guide was introducing. In his mind, he began to analyze the feasibility of the theft. There's one premise. According to Roselle's intentions, the various churches and the ancient royal families wouldn't wish for him to spread the cards of blasphemy and destroy the stable order that has been in place for more than 1,000 years. Therefore, if I'm an archbishop in charge of handling this matter, I will directly burn all of Roselle's items. If the cards of blasphemy can be destroyed so completely, the outcome will perfectly suit the thoughts of the deities. If the cards of blasphemy are difficult to be destroyed, they will definitely expose their abnormality after the burning. Since Roselle's items still remain, that means that he used certain methods to make everyone, including the deities, believe that he had sent out all the cards of blasphemy without keeping a single one. Of course, I can't eliminate the possibility that some churches or ancient families might attempt to use the cards of blasphemy to make up for their incomplete Seer Pathways. But this possibility is very tiny. This is because it will give Roselle an opportunity to come up with a united front strategy. There wouldn't be a need for him to go so far as to destroy the order by spreading the cards of blasphemy. In that case, his diary will show a certain level of confidence and corresponding concern, and he definitely wouldn't be left with pessimism to the point of only thinking of relying on that ancient secret organization. Furthermore, it's been more than 100 years. The Church of the God of Steam and Machinery, who has retained these remains, must have made numerous supplementary searches. Therefore, no one would believe that the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery remain hidden in here. In other words, the security level of this exhibition wouldn't be too high. Besides, the most important point is that Backlund is currently under siege by the terror caused by the devil's serial murders. The Beyonders of the three churches must be sweeping through the entire city. The amount of manpower that the Machinery Hivemind squad can afford to place at this unimportant exhibition would be extremely limited. Yes, the thing most worthy of protection here is Roselle's diary. Many wild Beyonders worship the Emperor greatly. They believe that the book written with independently created symbols must contain more profound mysteries. There's a motive to stealing them, and they have the ability to do so. Therefore, the guard's focus will definitely be in that exhibition hall. I'll do a divination above the gray fog when I'm back to verify my analysis. However, I have to first test if it's a card of blasphemy. Otherwise, I would be taking a certain risk and wasting tremendous effort only to steal an ordinary bookmark. If that happened, I might as well lie back in my grave. Yes, how should I verify it? It can't wait till I infiltrate again, and I don't have an opportunity to do so now. I have to find someone to help. I have to be careful. Klein's followed behind the guide with a focused expression as though he was very attentive. Miss Magician is an apprentice. She is able to go through walls and doors. It's like she possesses a master key, so she's a good candidate. However, she's only sequence 9. The mission of infiltrating to do the verification is way too dangerous for her, Miss Zio. No, she wouldn't be up to this. Let her get a thief to help. No, that won't do. There are Beyonder guards here. The thief would most likely get caught on the spot, which will expose the fact that someone is looking into Roselle's bookmark, Miss Sharon. She's powerful enough and her state is suitable for this kind of quest, but the problem is that the card of blasphemy is a divine object that can make most Beyonders willing to kill. I still don't trust her enough, Klein thought, analyzing the helpers he could use. Gradually, he had a candidate in mind, Miss Justice. Is it possible for her to use her wealth and power as a noble to touch the bookmark, using her interest as an excuse? There are plenty of opportunities. Furthermore, this method won't alarm anyone. It would be beneficial for me to sneak in and steal it in the future. The more Klein thought about it, the more he found it feasible. As for the question of how to verify it, as the card of blasphemy possessed anti-divination and anti-prophecy characteristics, the only solution he could think of for the time being was to attempt to destroy the bookmark. Doesn't anti-divination and anti-prophecy mean that using a similar method on a particular object that hides a card of blasphemy would result in failure or interference? Wouldn't that be tantamount to exposing itself? What it really means is that even with the card of blasphemy, divining it will be equivalent to divining an ordinary object. The divination would result in something equivalent to the ordinary object. In any case, I can't figure out what password the Emperor set. I can only use such a simple and crude method to confirm it. If the card of blasphemy can really be destroyed, then it only means that I'm temporarily unfaded with it. Yes, with the Emperor's liking, perhaps I can try an activation incantation. He once joked in his diary, saying, "My fortune is yours for the taking, but you'll have to find it first." I left everything I own at the ends of the fog sea, and the card of blasphemy is one of those treasures. The activation incantation could be set to 1 piece in ancient Hermes. That's not right. That way, there would be no one who can obtain anything. unless a second transmigrator appears. This isn't in accordance with the Emperor's intention to create chaos and destroy order, so the corresponding word for pirate king was in either Hermes or ancient Hermes. Klein slowly confirmed his thoughts, paying more and more attention to the layout of the exhibition hall. Under the guidance of the female guide, they left the restored study and entered another exhibition hall. When everything was over and he was free to move around, Klein said, a little embarrassed, "Excuse me, but I would like to know where the washroom is." "Upstairs." "No, that's where our office is. If you follow this path until the end before turning left, you will see it." The female guide politely pointed in a direction. Using this opportunity, Klein figured out the connections of the washroom and several large exhibition halls, and he sketched out a rough layout in his mind. At noon, he left the Royal Museum without doing anything and returned to 15 Minsk Street. Klein had originally wanted to instruct Miss Justice as the fool, saying that his adorer needed help. But on second thought, he felt that it would ruin the image of Mr. Fool. As an unfathomable figure, he has to appear calm and collected. He can't always be helping his adorer. At the very least, he can't be personally bringing up such matters time and time again. Klein thought for a moment and quickly worked out a solution. He decided to pass on the image and voice of his adorer's plea directly to Miss Justice. In the process, Mr. Fool didn't say anything. Phew. Klein exhaled, drew the curtains, rubbed his cheeks, and began to pray to himself. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. The mysterious ruler above the gray fog. The king of yellow and black who wields good luck. I pray for your help. I hope that someone can help me touch the bookmark in Roselle's manuscript of creativity. Help me inflict small and unnoticeable damage to it and tell me of its results. While doing so, one can recite the corresponding term for pirate king in Hermes or ancient Hermes. No matter who helps me, even if there isn't a reaction, I will be willing to pay them £500. This can be deducted from the £5,000 that has not yet been paid. If there is a reaction, I am willing to give more. After doing all of this, Klein waited for a moment before entering the gray fog, and he saw the scene of his prayer displayed on the screen of light. After divining that the theft of the bookmark in the Royal Museum involved a certain amount of danger but wasn't too high, he extracted the plea and added more of a mosaic effect to it. He also distorted his voice slightly, and he threw it into the illusory star that symbolized Miss Justice. 319 Audrey's adventure in Empress Borough, the opulent villa of Earl Hall. Audrey was supposed to be practicing her piano at this time, but she remained seated in front of her dressing table, thinking about how to read and memorize Roselle's diary in the evening. Suddenly, her surroundings became hazy, and a boundless grayish-white began to emanate. In the middle of the gray fog, the fool's figure sat high above. He was listening to a man who was barely visible pray. I pray for your help. I hope that someone can help me touch the bookmark in Roselle's manuscript of creativity. How does Mr. Fool know that I'll be visiting the Roselle Memorial Exhibition this evening after the museum is closed, and that I'll have the opportunity of touching some items? Audrey listened in a daze. Although she was amazed, she didn't find it odd. With Mr. Fool's stature and abilities, being aware of such a trivial matter is very easy. As for how he learned of it, there was no need for ordinary Beyonders to attempt to comprehend it. Audrey was about to reply when the fool spoke in a low, flat voice. You can choose to accept this request or not. Audrey pondered for 2 seconds and said, Respected Mr. Fool, I can try, but I can't guarantee success. She wasn't really interested in the minimum reward of £500. The reason why she had accepted the mission was that she was curious about the special nature of the bookmark left behind by Emperor Roselle, which was so important to the blessed of Mr. Fool that he offered an uncapped price. Anyway, I was going to look through Roselle's diary today, so it's convenient, Audrey thought. Amidst the fog, the fool nodded slightly and replied with a single word, "Okay." When the illusion was completely gone, Audrey turned her gaze to the dressing mirror and seemed to examine herself closely. Feeling both nervous and excited, she began to make plans for the evening operation. I cannot let them notice anything unusual. Even if Mr. Fool's Bless does take any action later, I cannot become a suspect. It's definitely not okay to only touch that bookmark. The moment it's lost, all eyes will be focused on me. Yes. So I need to show equal interest in all the other objects. I cannot let others notice that my main goal is that bookmark. The entire process has to be fluid, nothing sudden, and it has to be reasonable and logical. How should I cause inconspicuous damage? It's just a bookmark. Audrey's eyes swept across the items on her dressing table without focus. Suddenly, her gaze fell on an open jewelry box and focused on a pair of gemstone earrings adorned with fine needles. The corners of her lips curled up bit by bit, as her eyebrows and eyes slightly curved as she muttered to herself, "With Susie's help, it should be enough." It was 6 o'clock in the evening. Backland, that hardly ever saw the sun during the current season, was already dark, and the gas lamps were lit up. After the Royal Museum sent off the last batch of ordinary visitors, it received a group of visitors composed of the young lady from a count family, the child of a duke, and a young viscount. As the machinery hive mind knew that some of the aristocratic children were foppish people who frequently caused trouble, the captain of the machinery hive mind's Westboro squad, Max Livermore, was responsible for guarding the memorial. He had no choice but to disguise himself as a security guard and stay close by to prevent any accidents. His hair was neatly combed as he wore a monocle, making his scholarly appearance akin to a college professor. The monocle was actually a sealed artifact, codenamed 31328, named Eye of Crystal. With it, Max Livermore could see the spiritual body directly, as well as ghosts and shadows. There was no need to fear Beyonders who used these usually difficult-to-detect entities to cause chaos or engage in theft. Of course, this sealed artifact also had a significant disadvantage. It could easily attract monsters like wraiths and shadows to the vicinity. If it was worn for a long time, one's vision would suffer irreversible damage. In the gloom of Backland, she's like the bright sun. At that moment, Max was looking admiringly at the blonde girl with green eyes to his side. Audrey looked with great interest at the toilet, which was gold-plated and engraved with intricate patterns. She asked the guide beside her, "Is this the first toilet in the modern sense?" "Yes, I personally believe that this is one of Roselle's most outstanding contributions to human civilization. The sewer works that go with it have changed the phenomenon of filth being all over the streets of Trier." The guide originally wanted to say the word feces, but after looking at the girl in front of him, he felt that he couldn't lose his elegance. Audrey hesitated and asked, "Can I touch it? Can it still be used normally?" Viscount Glaint asked with a laugh from the side. "Why are you so curious about this? No matter how old it is, it's ultimately still a toilet." The other aristocratic children who were on good terms with them all laughed. "No, Glaint, you don't understand. This is the glory of human civilization." Audrey smiled faintly in response but barfed inwardly. "If it wasn't to fulfill the request of Mr. Fool's Blessed, I wouldn't want to do this either," she sighed helplessly. The guide chimed in. "What Miss Hall said is very right. The glory of human civilization isn't only reflected in firearms and other weapons that have changed the form of war, but they also shine in every detail of our lives. My lady, I don't know if it can still be used properly because no one will use it." The guide glanced at Max Livermore and after receiving a nod of confirmation continued, "You can touch it, and you may even open the water tank to take a look at the mechanical structure inside. But please be careful." "Thank you." Audrey watched as the security guard opened the glass wall. She hurriedly took 2 steps forward, reached out her right hand, which was covered in white fishnet gloves, and carefully touched the flush button. Then she slowly stepped back and said with a smile, "All right, let's keep it at that. I've satisfied my curiosity. I can't hurt it any further." She constantly reminded herself that her prescribed character was that of a naive and curious young girl. After reading this, they entered the exhibition hall where Roselle's diary was located. After some introduction, Audrey asked again, "Can I look through this notebook? We are all interested in these strange symbols." I heard that paper would suffer damage by mere contact with air after a certain period of time, let alone having them touched. It shouldn't be possible, right? She blinked, making her beautiful gem-like eyes express sincerity and desire, together with a little disappointment. The guide looked at Max Livermore again and waited for his reply before smiling. The church used a special storage method to make the paper look the same as if it was produced only a few years ago. Furthermore, even without this method, we will try our best to fulfill your requests. However, we may need to change environments, change our clothes, and go through a stricter process. You can flip it, but not for too long. Don't use too much strength. Audrey's eyes lit up all of a sudden, making it hard for anyone to shift their gaze away. After sincerely thanking the guide, she, Viscount Glaint, and the other mysticism enthusiasts had the glass cover removed as they carefully flipped through the notebook. Audrey tried her best to memorize, but due to the complexity of the symbols, her ability to remember them in this short period of time was rather limited. That should be around 2 pages of content. I wonder if there's any way to make a copy of it. Her thoughts wandered as she gave her spot to her peers. In this way, she made a request for a closer look at something in each of the exhibition halls, which was mostly met. After a while, they arrived at the restored study. Audrey kept to her previous behavior and would ask a few questions from time to time, fully displaying her curiosity. When the guide introduced the manuscript of creativity, her eyes lit up and she said, "Can I flip through it? I wish to see what the manuscript of the great inventor, Roselle, looks like. I also want to know what wonderful ideas it contains." "No problem, beautiful Miss Hall, Honorable Viscount Glaint, you can all have a look through it. Heh, if any of you are a devout believer of the church, you can even apply for a copy," the guide replied, according to Max's gesture. As a believer of the goddess, Audrey could only respond with a faint smile. It wasn't convenient for her to make a comment. At the same time, she pretended to lift her hair and touched her right ear with her palm, quietly removing her earring. Immediately, when the glass case that encased the desk was opened, Audrey stepped forward and, holding down the manuscript, casually pulled out the bookmark before casually flipping a page. At this moment, Susie, who had received her hint, suddenly barked in a particular direction. Woof, woof, woof. The crowd's attention was immediately attracted in that direction. Audrey lowered her arm and used the earring in her palm to stab at the bookmark she was holding. While doing so, she chanted the phrase Pirate King in her mind, using Hermes before switching to Ancient Hermes. When the sharp, needle-like accessory touched the surface of the bookmark, Audrey suddenly felt an intense and illusory resistance just as it was about to penetrate the bookmark. An unusual resistance. The resistance disappeared in a flash. The fine needle punctured a tiny hole and nearly pierced through. There really is a reaction. There's really something strange about it. The light in Audrey's eyes glinted. Without daring to try again, she lifted her hand and placed the bookmark on the desk. Then she looked at Susie and calmly told her maidservant Annie, "Take her to the bathroom." "Yes, m'lady." Annie hurriedly led Susie out of the room. Ting. Taking this opportunity, Audrey threw the earring in her hand onto the ground. Then she tilted her head and said, "I'm sorry, I dropped my earring." Another maid hurried over, picked up the earring and helped her put it on. The interlude went by in a flash, and everyone's attention returned to the manuscript. After they were pretty much done with it, They saw the security guard, Max Livermore, quickly tuck the bookmark in and close the glass cover again. Audrey's interest remained as strong as before in the next few exhibition halls. Just like before, she didn't show any abnormalities. It was only when she left the museum and returned home did she find a chance to recite the honorific name of the fool and report the results. I did what your blessed requested, and I damaged that bookmark a little. It had an abnormal reaction. 320 action and abnormal reaction. From the looks of it, it really is a card of blasphemy. Above the gray fog, Klein, who received the reply, was delighted at first, but he then exclaimed in surprise, "Isn't Miss Justice way too efficient? I only entrusted the mission to her this afternoon, and she has already completed the verification by the evening. Furthermore, this is obviously past the closing time of the Royal Museum. A telepathist also definitely lacks infiltration abilities. Her family's influence is probably even greater than I expected." Thankfully, the verification didn't produce any strange phenomena. Otherwise, the only thing that can be done is to allow Miss Justice to act innocent and hand the card over to the higher authorities. And this also means that I'm not fated to have this treasure. There's nothing in this world with 100% certainty. Amidst his thoughts, Klein heard Miss Justice's subsequent question. "Mr. Fool, exactly what secret lies in that bookmark?" "Well, if your adorer is unwilling to give you the answer, just pretend that I didn't ask. Of course, the secret is that it hides a card of blasphemy inside." Klein was overjoyed as he silently sighed. After thinking it over carefully, he decided to wait until he obtained the card of blasphemy before replying to Miss Justice. Otherwise, she might appear too shocked and act strangely, causing his own actions to be negatively affected. Klein was in no hurry to return to the real world. He just sat there in the silent, empty old palace, thinking about when to act and how to do it. Miss Justice has done some damage to that bookmark, so I wonder if someone would later discover the damage. Otherwise, would the bookmark slowly show signs of abnormality and attract attention? Thus, I cannot afford to delay or wait. It would be best if I take action tonight. As all sorts of ideas churned through his mind, Klein gradually came to a decision. Then, on the basis of his morning observations, he conjured the layout of the Royal Museum's first floor and the general conditions surrounding it. Looking at this blueprint, Klein began going through different plans and quickly established a relatively safe plan. Finally, he made another divination to confirm the degree of danger. After seeing that nothing had changed, he returned to the real world and began making all sorts of preparations. What Klein originally wanted to do was to draw the pattern in his memory, forge a similar bookmark, and replace it after he had sneaked in via responding to himself. He wanted to ensure that no one noticed or know for a long time that the bookmark had been stolen. By the time it was discovered, it would be too late for others to trace the incident back to him. However, after much deliberation, he felt that this wasn't good. As long as the fake bookmark was discovered, the most suspicious person would be Miss Justice, who touched the original bookmark today. I can't put Miss Justice at risk for the sake of a treasure. She did this to help me. Klein finally figured out how to keep Miss Justice from being suspected. His plan was to not only steal the bookmark but to also steal the surrounding items as well, including some of the lighter books. Phew. After finishing his preparations, Klein took out his gold pocket watch and opened it. He patiently waited until after 9. He wanted to act before midnight. If he were too early, people living around there wouldn't have started sleeping. That wouldn't satisfy his requirement for taking action. If he were too late, there would be almost no pedestrians on the streets. Just walking along the streets would make him be easily suspected, and during this period of time, the whole of Backland was under tight curfews due to serial murders. This was beneficial to Klein's operation, but it was also disadvantageous. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The needle kept ticking. As the night deepened, the crimson moon appeared and it was finally past 9. Putting the master key and other items in his pockets, he took his cane and first went to East Borough to change his attire. Then he rented a carriage several times until he reached a place quite far from King's Avenue in West Borough. By then, an hour and 45 minutes had already passed. His initial plan was actually nothing like this. He wanted to summon himself and respond to himself to become a spirit body. He wanted to rely on his extremely fast speed to cross the distance from Sherwood Borough to West Borough before infiltrating the Royal Museum. However, he eventually abandoned the plan because of the potentially high risks. Backland had more than one high-sequence beyonder. In a situation where a serial killer caused everyone to panic, yet remained unsolved for such a long time, there might be high-sequence beyonders who were consciously using their beyonder powers or corresponding sealed artifacts to monitor certain areas. The distance from Sherwood Borough to West Borough was neither too long nor too short, and the probability of being discovered was substantial if such a special spirit flew like this. This cannot be completely written off just because the divination result says that the risk isn't high, but there is the existence of certain danger, because the divination doesn't give a direct answer, but a revelation that needs to be interpreted. In other words, the results of the risk isn't high, but there is the existence of certain danger, is built on the premise that I make a relatively good choice. Therefore, to be careful, Klein modified his original plan but retained the core idea. 2 King's Avenue, Royal Museum. There were 4 security guards standing on top of a polygonal roof. Dressed in thick robes, they were enduring the cold of the autumn night as they carefully monitored their respective directions. Once anyone approached the museum, even if they were hidden by the trees or building shadows, it would be difficult to hide from their eyes. From this arrangement alone, it could be seen that the security company that had been employed was very professional. There's still half an hour before our shift ends. A security guard looked down at his companions who were patrolling the building and shook his body. In the museum, the remaining security personnel were divided into 4 groups. They patrolled the various exhibition halls in intervals according to different routes. In the showroom where Roselle's diary was kept, the Machinery Hivemind Squad captain, Max Livermore, wore a monocle that allowed him to directly see wraiths, shadows, and other spirit-type monsters. He carried a lantern as he went back and forth to check on the area. Occasionally, he would head to the other halls to check on the situation. His 2 subordinates remained in the small hall next to Roselle's diary. However, there was an additional item on the glass display case. It was a collection of brightly colored blocks that had been pieced together into a miniature layout of the museum's first floor. This was also a sealed artifact. As long as those blocks were pieced into the shape of a corresponding building, they would be able to establish a connection with the real building. Once anyone intruded, its surface would react immediately by shrinking. Of course, there were quite a few limitations to this. The distance couldn't be too far, and it wouldn't work if the number of blocks it had wasn't enough to piece together the building. And without external help, it was almost impossible for people or items inside to leave. "Captain, do you really think someone will steal this notebook? I can't comprehend it at all," one of the team members asked in a bored tone when he saw Max coming back with his lantern. Max smiled and said, "Some people adore Roselle with zeal. It's not something you can understand. Some of them believe that they can crack it and only need more information for reference. Some of them believe that the symbols contain a mysterious power. As long as they can find the correct combination, they will gain beyonder powers. In previous exhibitions, we would capture such criminals from time to time. So that's why we didn't hide the notebook away and place them in sealed areas. "We are waiting for these people to surrender themselves," another teammate asked with enlightenment. Max nodded and said, "Who wouldn't want free meritorious deeds?" 18 Kings Avenue, outside a building next to a crossroad junction. Klein followed the shadows and shaded areas, using the master key from time to time to walk in a straight line before finally arriving here. He took out the plain brass key, pointed it at the kitchen door, and turned it silently. An imperceptible rippling happened as Klein entered the room. All the way through, he saw doors and walls, and without disturbing anyone, he found a storage room. This master key is really useful. However, both of its previous owners lost themselves and entered dangerous spots. It makes me afraid of continuously carrying it. Klein sighed as he put away the brass key. With the room beside him being the servants' sleeping quarters, he took out holy night powder and released his spirituality to seal off the storage room, making any commotion from within impossible to leak out. Then, he took out a candle and placed it on a crate in front of him. Pa! He snapped his finger and produced a light blue spirituality fire on his fingertip. After the candle wick was lit, he summoned himself using ritualistic magic and then responded to himself above the gray fog. Less than a minute later, Klein was floating in the room, facing his body whose eyes had lost their luster. After familiarizing himself with this feeling, he wrapped the ancient and exquisite Aztec copper whistle to stabilize his spirit body and made it stronger. It caused a chilly wind to begin to swirl in the room. At the same time, he also used this power to slightly change the appearance of his illusory spirit body, causing it to appear as if there was a layer of paint on its face. After doing all of this, Klein took a box of common matches he randomly bought off the streets, cut out a transparent door in the wall of spirituality, and headed out. Action time. He silently encouraged himself, and just like a real ghost, he passed through the residential buildings, one by one, before successfully arriving outside the Royal Museum. There was no need to activate his spirit vision. In this state, he could clearly see every security personnel, their aura, and emotions which unreservedly betrayed them. Finding the withered lawn and the iron-black lamppost that faced the hall window, Klein didn't swagger over just because ordinary people couldn't see him. Instead, he followed the shadows and took an elusive route. He passed through the sculpted tree and obstacles before cautiously arriving at his destination. He stuck close to the wall, as he couldn't guarantee that the security personnel didn't comprise of a member of the machinery hive mind. At this moment, the 4 security guards on the rooftop, who were carefully inspecting their respective areas of operations, were like blind people. They failed to discover anything. Klein didn't enter the exhibition hall directly, because his spiritual perception and intuition told him that the museum floor was shrouded in a mysterious power. It also had to do with how he couldn't confirm if there were Beyonders inside. He followed his plan and circled to another area, to the washroom that was closer to the exhibition hall that housed Roselle's diary. Then, he threw the box of matches he had brought with him through the vent. Next, he flew up and entered the second floor.